Perfect pitch, also known as absolute pitch, is the ability to recognize and reproduce a note from nowhere without any reference note or any help from anything.
A, so A.
It's a pretty cool trick and can be a very useful skill, and artists like Charlie Puth and Jacob Collier are always showing off their perfect pitch abilities. However, it's pretty widely accepted that you can't actually learn to have perfect pitch. It's something you either have and develop as you learn music, or you don't have it. Which is why it came as a slight shock to me when I went to the World Wide Web and Googled, can you learn perfect pitch? And I found that there were several studies and places across the internet that suggest that you can actually develop it, or at the very least mimic perfect pitch, which is called pseudo perfect pitch. And that is what I attempted to do. But before I did, I wanted to get some kind of baseline. I wanted to set the standard so that I knew exactly what I was working with. And for this, I used an app called Tone, which has a very simple premise. It will play a note, and then I have to decipher what the note is. Let's have a go. B flat. C. G flat, nowhere near. As you can see, not the most successful attempt and definitely worse than I was expecting. The main reason that I thought I might be okay at this is because as soon as you know what the first note is, you can then use that note to work out the rest. However, in this test, there is a time limit to each guess, and with the anxiety of a pale orange line running down the screen, I almost forgot my own name. Never mind how notes relate to each other. So I immediately knew that I would need a more robust method. I also wanted to set what I thought success would mean, and based on my miserable attempt, I came up with two things that I would consider to be successful. Number one was 10 consecutive correct answers without any reference notes. And number two was to be able to sing 10 randomly requested notes in a row. And so the quest for perfect pitch began. The first place I started was by trying to develop my relative pitch. Relative pitch is very similar to perfect pitch, but you can use a reference note to find other notes. Now, I am a pianist and I've studied and trained music for many years, so I happen to think in a non-pressured situation, when an app isn't looking at you with disappointment as each second passes, that my relative pitch is already pretty good. And I do use relative pitch all the time in general music life. But the problem is that to develop pseudo-perfect pitch, you have to have at the very least one note that you can just pull out of nowhere, and then from that note, you can go on to use relative pitch to find all of the other notes. At least, that's what it says when I went back to the secret musician's directory of information, Google. Throughout my musical career, there have always been two notes that I have been able to somewhat remember for various reasons. The first one is an A. This is because string instruments usually tune their instruments to an A. So if you ever hear an orchestra tuning, it's often an A that you will hear. And because I used to play the viola, which happens to be the best string instrument, that is a note that I can more often than not reproduce without any reference. The second note I can do this with is a C, and this is because when I was at music college, I played a piece by Chopin. It was his Etude Opus 10 No. 1, and this starts with a C chord and a very strong C. That piece is very difficult and required a lot of practice, so the opening note kind of stuck with me. C is also a very common note in music for a number of reasons. A C scale tends to be the first scale musicians learn. There are lots of songs written in the key of C and use lots of Cs. C. So I decided that this was going to be the note that I tried to remember and use as my reference note. Now, although I can pull a C out of thin air most of the time, it's not 100%. And if this was going to be how I was going to work out every other note, then I needed to make sure that I could definitely get a C every time. The problem with this is, how do you practice and test it? Once you've heard a C, then you can remember it. And if I was going to try and do this within 24 hours, then I can't afford to wait until I've forgotten what a C sounds like so that then I can test it again. So I went with the second best option, which was to try and sing a C and then play a load of random stuff on the piano to try and forget it and then test it again. If I didn't get the C, then I would play the first part of Chopin's Etude to try and reinforce my memory of that C. And I did this for what turned out to be hours. flats. C. And I now genuinely think I will never forget what C sounds like for the rest of my life with the amount of times I sat and sang it. Having got the C lodged in my head, the next step was to try and improve my relative pitch for all of the other notes. And the way that is thought to be a good way for doing this is to use different songs that include different note distances, also known as intervals. So for a C to a C sharp, I used the Jaws theme, da da. For C to a D was the first two notes of Happy Birthday, da 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 da. C to an E flat was the start of Greensleeves, da 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 da. C to an E was Oh When the Saints, da 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 da. C to an F was Here Comes the Bride, da 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 da. C to an F sharp was Maria, da da da. C to a G was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, twinkle twinkle. C to an A flat was originally The Entertainer, but I found that I remembered better a piece that I'd heard in my past, which was Shostakovich's Symphony No. 5, which goes da 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 da. The first two notes of that were more memorable to me, so I used that song. C to an A was My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, da 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 da. C to a B flat was Somewhere from West Side Story, da 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 da. And C to a B was Pure Imagination, a world of pure imagination. The idea is that you can find any note from a C using these songs if you know them well enough. And hopefully, if you are asked what a note is, then if you sing a C in your head and then the note that you're being asked to sing back, that will trigger the memory of that song. But this means I had to know the songs inside out, which obviously meant several more hours of singing the same songs over and over again to myself. There's a world of pure imagination, my Bonnie lies over the ocean. Maria, which was great. After several hours and location changes, along with the realization that posting videos requires editing, I'm gonna have to edit this. I decided to test myself again to see if there was any improvement in my abilities, having spent many hours finding different pitches. And the results? Exactly the same as earlier that morning, which was very discouraging considering I had a very nice title lined up for this video, which could be ruined. So at this point, I decided that I needed to take a small break by going home and continuing to test myself periodically by checking I could still sing a C and then using the perfect pitch test. Over the sea. Having long enough breaks between testing myself so I could legitimately forget a C and then re-find it started to give me more confidence in finding the notes, and I started to think that maybe this title might not be too far-fetched. Although, don't get me wrong, I was still making many mistakes. Having spent several more hours testing myself at home, I decided to return to the studio because I needed to teach some students, to film some TikToks, but most importantly, I needed to get this challenge nailed down once and for all. And with that, I spent several more hours sitting at the piano singing the same songs to myself. This is the evening sessions of me trying to get perfect pitch, testing myself with the app on my phone and randomly singing C's like my music career depended on it. And that was it. The day was done. The following day was to be the day to find out if I was in fact to pass my perfect pitch test of being able to identify 10 consecutive notes without a reference and be able to sing 10 randomly generated notes. And that day happens to be today. Look, see? We're wearing the same clothes. Here's how it went. I haven't listened to a single note all morning. I haven't played this piano yet, so I'm gonna have a go and see what I can do. I'm kind of nervous. Okay, here we go. Let's see if I can do this. First time. Easy. 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 Seven. 8, 9, 10. I mean, they were quite easy, and there was a few times yesterday when I did get 10 out of 10. I wanted it to be very consistent though when I got to this point today, and hopefully that shows that first time I could do it, even if the note choices were easy. But that wasn't the only part that I wanted to be able to do. The second part I wanted to be able to do was to be able to sing any note and it be the right note. So, let's see if I can do that. So, I'm going to get a random note generator. It's going to give me a random note, and then I am going to try and sing it. So here we go, note number 1. Da, that's 1. Na, that's 2. That's 3. Da, no, that's 4. No, 5. 6. Yeah, 7. Yeah, 8. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 9. Yeah, 10. So I did it. But did I actually develop perfect pitch? Well, let me know what you think in the comments. I don't think I did. The notes that I were given in both tests were actually quite kind, because they were all kind of related to each other. And I did find myself remembering some of the notes during the test and using those as reference points for other notes, which I think is okay. That is a good test for my relative pitch. But I think it was precisely that. It was me using my relative pitch and my understanding of note distances to try and find other notes. I wasn't just pulling them out of nowhere. Although I did find it very useful to have a C that I could remember and use the songs if I lost all reference. But I'm also not sure that learning perfect pitch isn't possible. I was able to find a C every time just by how the sound felt, so maybe that's possible for every note with enough training. But what I definitely did do was develop pseudo perfect pitch and give the impression of being able to find notes from nowhere, which is kind of cool. But I've also learned that it's kind of pointless. I've always thought perfect pitch is such a gift and it would be nice to have it. But I couldn't help but think throughout the many hours I spent trying to find notes that it doesn't really have that many uses, and developing really strong relative pitch is actually so much more useful and achievable. Another aspect of music that is very doable is writing pop songs, and if you want to know why most pop songs use the same 4 chords, then check out this video and I will see you there.